Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I will be discussing The White Rose, the third book in the first Black Company omnibus. This I had been doing, as a reminder, with the read along with Slowly Read, Mark on that channel, which I will link to down below. And this, I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep going the whole thing with doing one per month, but I got at least the second two. I read the first one last year. But so wanted to finally get around to doing my review for The White Rose, and then kind of just talking about this first omnibus in general, since I now have completed it. I do have some more omnibuses, so hopefully I have time to continue with it. But let's get into with that, talking about the Black Company and the third book, The White Rose. So we start off in the omnibus with kind of meeting the Black Company. They end up in the service of the lady, and then going through some crazy battles against the group called the Rebel. And the White Rose, as mentioned that early as well, is kind of the prophesized figure who will stand against the lady, and in previous times did against the Dominator, the lady, and the 10 who were taken, who were all very powerful, basically immortal magic users. So that's what they've signed up with. Then we see in Shadows Linger, we kind of take a weird detour. We spend a good chunk of the time with Naren Shed, and kind of the character study of how far can you push a man who is terrified of everything. How far can you go with that? It was that, while also the plot with the Black Company there, and a plot by the Dominator to be risen as well. And then, of course, the Black Company find themselves on the outs, and so the third book takes place largely in the plane of fear, which was teased in the in the second book, but it was interesting seeing what was done with the plane of fear and all of the different pieces there. But the White Rose is also different from the first two, as we kind of have a trio of storytelling going on. We had two different stories going on and intersecting in Shadows Linger. I liked both stories more than I liked how they connected, I mentioned. This one was a lot more tightly wound in a good way. We had the main Black Company story starting out, and then we had these missives coming that apparently had taken a really long time to get there, so we're all arriving at once, coming from somebody who we find out more about later, but somebody saying their name is Corby. They didn't actually sign it, but Corby was the name. And it's telling all about this ancient wizard, Bowmans, who, I guess not that ancient, but who was originally around during the time that the Dominator and the Lady and all were first defeated, basically. So this was quite some time ago, a couple hundred years, I believe. And so we're hearing the story of Bowmans, this wizard, and he is basically trying to get information from the lady, and without actually waking the lady or the Dominator or anyone. But we kind of, right from the outset, determined this is probably going to have to do with something how they originally did basically come out, because they're immortal, so they're not dead, but they were buried in the Barrowlands. And so we get to see this going on. A very interesting story of Bowmans, who's kind of an old man who does salvage as a front, selling that stuff from the Barrowlands, but all the time is researching, and his dynamic was very interesting to read. Then we have the other story, which is the just minorly distant past, not too far ago, which is Corby, who's in the Barrowlands closer to present time, and is the one actually sending these letters to Croker at the Black Company headquarters on the Plane of Fear. And so we kind of get his story as well, where he's digging, trying to find information, and then we're getting that information through the letters. And it was a really interesting narrative choice, kind of having it all come together. Now, I will say, I think this is definitely the best written of the first three so far. The narrative was a lot cleaner. The first book was kind of odd and hard to understand a lot of what was going on, just because of the way that it was written, especially with it all being written from Croker's perspective. In the first person, he's writing the annals, he's telling the story, and so it's not only first person, but if he's not around for big events, we don't always see him there. Sometimes if he just doesn't want to talk about big events, he doesn't. And so it was an interesting way to craft the narrative. We had in Shadows Linger, the second book, both that from Croker and then also a third-person narrative of Shed. And here we have two third-person narratives and also Croker, and then all, once again, combining. While I do think this was the best written, I don't know if it is as good of a reading experience as the second book. I did really like Shed's story, and I enjoyed Bowman's story too, but this one kind of, after things started to come together, it seemed to slow down somehow, which doesn't make a ton of sense because you would think it's the build-up that would be the slow part, but it was really flowing super, super nice, and then once we kind of get there, things just slowed down a little bit. And we had, because I think Glen Cook just really enjoys the kind of the, I don't necessarily want to say like letdown endings, but he tends to have these things that should be big events. In any other book, any other author, it'd be this massive, huge event, and it just sort of happens in a really like low-key way. And we get that here with the ending where it feels a little underwhelming just because some huge events just kind of just happen. But that really does seem to be just Glen Cook's MO with the series in general. But it sets up potentially a lot. This did feel like a complete arc for these first three, so I think it does make sense to have these in the omnibus. And it set up quite a lot, too, for the stories to come. Obviously, there are multiple more omnibuses. Looks like I got 3. Was I pointing at the wrong books this whole time? I was pointing at the wrong books this whole time. They're right here. That's what happens when I just point without actually looking. But anyway, there are the other omnibuses, and this is a series I'm definitely interested enough to keep going. It's pretty unlike anything else I've ever read, and it's kind of hard to really say this is like this. I tried to make some weird equivalences in my first book review for just The Black Company, and those were kind of weird. It didn't fully work, but it's just changed a little bit. And I'm so interested to see where it goes because the narrative structure has been different every time. And Glen Cook just seems like he's really just picking up speed here. So I do have high hopes for the rest. It's not something that I feel like is going to be like a new favorite or that I'm just dying to get to the next one. But overall, I did enjoy the first 3 books enough that my interest is piqued and I do want to keep going. It does help that they're pretty short. This whole first omnibus is just under 700 pages. So, a little over, 200 pages per is what it averages. I think some of the other ones are a little bit longer, but they're not horribly long. And it's just kind of an interesting, different thing. So they're solid books to kind of throw on when you're looking for something a little bit different as well. And so that's kind of where I have been. I do think just the characters, the way Glen Cook writes them, are some of the most interesting parts. It was amazing the amount of character you got in the first book, just from the camaraderie, just from the way Croker talks, and the kind of the character studies that were done in books 2 and 3 to very different ways, to very different effects and very different types of characters, were really interesting, and it was such an interesting aspect, and I'm wondering if that's going to be something that continues, if we see kind of a character study on a specific type of individual that leads into the main story, or if that was maybe just for these. Because if I've learned anything, it's that Glen Cook likes to really change things up every book so far. So it'll be interesting to find out. But those are really the big kind of general points about talking about the series and this third book. I will say this third book had some really interesting action scenes. I'm not doing any spoilers, but we get to see lots of interesting creatures from the Plane of Fear, including wind whales and just the wind whales, a lot of like talking rocks, the men here, some other random creatures and change storms. It's pretty crazy and just really cool. And the use of the magic in the Plane of Fear as well by the Taken and the lady, their really creative uses of magic were so interesting and so different, and just it kind of made it feel a little bit out there, but in a really great way. It's once again, it's an odd first 3 books, but I definitely thought they were interesting. Overall, and I've been kind of back and forth, but I think on Goodreads I have this rated a 3. I liked it. I didn't go super high above that. There were parts that I really liked, and there were parts that I didn't care for that much. But overall, I liked this, and I'm interested to see. From what I've heard, a lot of people say that some of the later ones get like really, really good. And like I said, my interest is piqued enough. It's just kind of an interesting experience. Now, the one thing I also want to note, because I actually did some digging on this, because whenever you're being told where places are, I like a map in my book. I want maps, and apparently Glen Cook didn't like maps because not only are there no maps here, but there are very few that exist, and they were all created by fans. And apparently, it's a lot of the places, the way they were described, don't always make sense. And I think he just didn't want to have to steadily confirm where everything is. But I don't know. But darn it, Glen Cook, I wanted a map. And that was my big complaint. I kept all the different places that are referenced. I kept looking. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna check them. That's right. There's not a map. I like maps. I might do a map video. So anyway, that's my thoughts on The White Rose, this first omnibus of the Black Company. Let me know if you were a part of the buddy read that Mark was doing as well. Let me know your thoughts on these first 3 and on The White Rose, what you thought. Definitely be interesting to hear. That's why I've enjoyed so much doing buddy reads, especially for books that I would have been really slow to get to otherwise. So it's great having those conversations and talking about it. So let me know, once again, your thoughts. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more of my content. And also, if you want to join the discussion about this book or any other book, check the link in the description for the Wizardly Duo Discord, which is my Discord with Andrew's Wizardly Reads. Check it out as well. We have a lot of fun over there talking books and everything else. With that, those are my thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a video very soon.